do it.
We only have 6, so we need 4.
We're going to start our Stormwater Management Advisory Committee meeting for June, and we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, next, the meeting minutes, May's meeting minutes. I know that Regina, who you said she's running a bit late, Heather?
She said she's running late, and it's a 50-50 chance whether she'll be here, but she's going to try. She's going to try, but she'll just definitely be late.
Oh, okay. I might want to, I'll take anyone else's comments on the May meeting minutes, but Regina said she had a few minor changes, so I might defer the vote
To
on
the
the
end?
meeting minutes till the end.
And I wasn't at the May meeting, so
So-
I won't vote then.
Okay, I mean, if anyone else has any comments right now, I can incorporate them, and then we'll incorporate Regina's whenever she arrives. Okay? And we had an email regarding the April meeting minutes, which had been previously approved, requesting a couple wording changes in regard to the public comment, in regard to Mr. Morrison's comments. So I was going to bring that up to, officially change those minutes. Previously, Mr. Morrison noted that he and his wife, Gail, have been public about not supporting sumac. Instead, I was going to replace it with Brian Morrison noted that, and I quote, "My wife and I are pretty public about not being behind the Stormwater Committee," end quote, "though they respect the work the committee does." The other change was that when Mr. Morrison purchased his home, he was not notified that his property was in the floodplain. Change that to, it was not disclosed that his property was in the floodplain.
So I move we accept that change.
Okay.
Second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. Those changes are approved. And then I don't believe we have any public comment. So we can move on to other discussion, review of May 22nd Board of Commissioners meeting, stormwater items, which I attended. There was selection for the MS4 engineering services. Meliora Design was awarded the contract, and I understand that they're underway and meeting with the Township staff to get geared up here as quickly as possible. And I think, Heather, maybe you had some more comments on that?
Correct. I talked to Steve today, and he said that the GIS information from CH2M was transferred over via Dropbox, and that we should have access to it as well as anyone working on the MS4 permit. I think they're up and running from what Steve said, and my hopes are that at our July meeting, that they will be here to present mapping and GIS and to give us an idea of the area for each watershed for that 10% reduction. And then also it'd be nice to see a map that has township-owned properties, which is easy to do in GIS, to shuffle the data to show watersheds or who owns what properties. Not saying it all has to be done on township-owned, but I think we should start there. And then if an opportunity presents itself for some sort of coordination with something private, that's great. But we should start with the township-owned properties and figure out what type of best management practices, stormwater features that would benefit not only the township, but that would meet that MS4 permit requirement of 10% sediment reduction. So I think in order to make the deadline, which is the middle of September, there's a 45-day review and public comment time. That puts you at the first week, basically, of August. So in order to do that, I think they really need to be at our next meeting. I talked to Steve because I think it's beneficial that he's at our next meeting, since we're working with the township staff, coordinating on this effort. But I think he's on vacation, so we can think about if we want to still hold the meeting and maybe a subcommittee meets with Steve and during the week, just prior to our next meeting, just so we're all on the same page. I'm happy to do that.
I won't be at the next meeting.
All right, and any other comment on MS4?
And you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, the next meeting is July 13th. Oh, I will be back. I'm on vacation, but I'm back that day. So I will be here. But Steve won't be here for that July 13th meeting.
Any other comment on MS4? Moving along to, also at that May 22nd Board of Commissioners meeting, CH2M made a presentation on the North Wayne Basin cleaning and the potential mitigation projects. I don't know if anyone had an opportunity to see that.
I did watch it.
Yeah. And does anyone have any comment on that?
I think we got an email today from Steve that they're going to have another meeting in regards to that, because I think the residents. Are we talking North Wayne or Banbury? I'm sorry. Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah, I guess the one notable thing that came out of that was that they were going to get a price, I think, to get that basin cleaned out. And we'll see where that goes from there.
Right, because they voted to get proposals for that, right?
Yes.
At that
Yes, they
meeting,
did.
okay.
Mhm. Township staff stormwater project ranking criteria. That was also presented at that meeting. And this was, I know last time Maya had brought out in public comment, she had thought that the staff had been asked to pick some projects, but it was the stormwater criteria that was, that the township staff had been asked to take a look at that and maybe rework it a bit. They presented that, or Steve presented that at the Board of Commissioners meeting. It's something that adds up to 100. It's probably simpler to, it's more intuitive, I guess. Of course, anything is subjective in some measure, and I think it's intended to serve as a starting point. But I don't think anything's cast in stone when it comes out of that.
Well, and the other thing too, in regards to that, is when we're looking at potential projects for the MS4, it'd be nice to overlap them so we can not only go forth with certain projects that make the most sense, that are most cost effective, but that also meet that MS4 permit. So just, we can march forward with that, but just not be blinded. Let's try and merge the two together while we're doing that, so that we're killing two birds with one stone.
But that is one of the criteria they listed, but it was relatively low.
Right.
I thought. I mean, Elaine made the point that, that threat was up at the top, and I guess I'd make the counterpoint that threat was up at the top before we just didn't name it that. But I think that the way it's defined now, it's actually harder to make that a concrete decision, because it's defined abstractly. It's a threat. So what does that mean? So I think we have to break that down and say threat means roadway impassable, or threat means house inundation, or whatever you want to define it. But threat's just too general a point right now to say something specific about it. So we're going to have to do a little bit more.
Yeah, I think it's tough to fit into a little chart like that. if you have 6 inches of water in the street, or if you have 3 feet, if one person's basement gets wet, or if it's coming in a dozen front doors. And it's a little bit tough to capture that in plugging it into some formula there. And I think there's going to have to be some judgment when we see these numbers coming out of there as to which ones are truly the top. I mean, maybe the 4th project is actually the first project when we discuss the true impacts.
Right, and as we look at each project and we look at the, where it falls with that list, it might be that one just jumps to the head, whether it's first now or 4th later. There might be ones that I think eventually will vet itself, that'll be, the project to go with.
Moving along, I don't know if you want to continue the township-wide assessment discussion, or if you want to go through the updates on other projects, which maybe that would be easier to do.
Yeah, let's just do the updates now. I think that'd be
Yeah.
quick.
I don't know if everyone saw Steve sent out an update. I spoke to him this morning. The Highview project, he's been out there and talking to the property owner about the scope and the such, and I understand that there's also a neighboring property that I believe it's a temporary easement, Steve had told me, that would be required. That's a recent purchaser of that property. They haven't actually moved into the property yet. But Steve has their contact information, and he's going to be getting in touch with them. He doesn't have a price for it yet, and the price that he receives would not include the easements. So that's an unknown.
Just so I understand this, do you buy an easement? How do you get an easement?
Well, yeah, I mean, you offer someone a certain amount of money or something in return for them granting the easement.
And that's a defined geometric area, or?
Yes, there are meets and bounds, that will be written up. There'll be a formal survey description written up of the easement. And then whenever that property transfers, that would be recorded, and that would be found, when he did a title search. I know there's not an easement now. I'm not sure if John Rice has weighed in, if there's, de facto easement, or some sort of adverse possession or anything like that. But I think first they're going, try to get the easement and go from there, I would think. And Banbury Francis, there was a meeting with the neighbors, the impacted neighbors, and there were some concerns voiced about a number of things. One was the trees that might be impacted, and I think at least initially there were some concerns that maybe the project wasn't needed, but hopefully we'll get beyond that.
Did you get the pictures? Did they ever go through? Because I did send them.
I did. There was
Did
a
you?
PDF file that I sent the pictures of.
I mean, it's substantial flooding there.
Yeah,
I mean, it might
yeah.
not have been in the last couple years, but when we had that last, was it 3 years ago or 4 years ago, we had that exceptionally high rainfall that summer.
Mhm.
That's what happened, and it was several feet deep. That was,
So my understanding is the next step is the township is calling a meeting. We're going to be informed of it. It's going to be with the residents and the contractor and the administration, Steve or whoever, and then we'll be invited to come and listen and see what their concerns are.
Yeah, I think that's the case, and I think they'll hold that meeting when there's something to tell the residents. Until they can say which trees might come down until they can, tell them a little more about the impacts, that's what they need to get to there. But I did ask Steve if there was any investigation into that pipe easement on the Baskin-Robbins property, because I think that could reduce the amount of Windsor that's impacted. I seem to recall only about half of Windsor was impacted with the pipe easement, but I guess since the Board of Commissioners went with completing the right-of-way, that they have not pursued that.
Just explain how that would help. I was confused by that.
So the whole underground storage system would tie into the existing piping at a lower elevation, so you could have greater depth of storage.
Oh, okay.
And that's, you wouldn't need to go as far up Windsor. Apparently that they are not investigating that, no. Any other outstanding projects or anything that you'd like to discuss?
Steve, oh, it's down here further on your list, but Steve did in his summary, he lists that high view, and he also listed the televising. And,
Right.
And then the upcoming budget as well, just a couple other miscellaneous things if you wanted to.
Oh, and then Maplewood.
And Maplewood, yes.
That there have been a few design options, and there was another one that the township had requested, and after that, they'll bring that project to us, or give us an update on that project.
So I did have a concern, I'm just looking at this here. Have a concern about the projects that we proposed to the Board of Commissioners. So I know we're kind of in this discussion about the SEPTA upgrade. It's my understanding that Steve's bringing that they got permission from Amtrak to get on site, and that they're going to bring that before the board on the 12th. And I asked Steve if that could be something where they say it would be sampled for the larger project rather than the smaller one. And he indicated that that wasn't before the board. And so I'm saying I feel like it should be considered. If we're going to do it, let's just do it all at once.
I think there might be a couple concerns with that, and Heather, you can chime in here too. It may be a different parcel of land, and we don't have permission from the property owner to do that. The other concern would be that we only have something very conceptual as design, and you need to have specific testing depths and locations all set to go before you do that sort of testing. So if we tested it even, we might just end up testing at depths and locations that just weren't appropriate for that site.
So then we would need, is this going to have to be two separate projects before the board?
It could be merged in together as one project, but right now that other piece where there's just a very conceptual design, someone would need to take that design further to know where and what depth to test.
So for you engineers, what would you recommend that the board do?
Well, I guess I'd like to see the board put out the RFP for the design proposals, and that will get everything in motion, and then we'll know, when the company starts their design, starts investigating, we'll know what might be viable there.
And when they do a preliminary design, they don't have to crunch every little number. They can do very rough calculations to figure out the approximate size of the bed. And then the other thing they could do too is while they're testing, they could test at different depths. So while they're there, if they think the bed is, I'm just picking a number, like 50 by 100, they could test maybe 7 feet down, 8 feet down, 9 feet down. While they're there, they could test it at different levels. Gives them a little more flexibility depending on what eventually the size of the bed is. But you have to have a ballpark idea and run some calcs before, because they, especially DEP, when you're doing a project, they want to see, especially the MPDS permits, they want to see the bottom of your bed, who tested it, what the testing depth was, because they want it within like a foot, 6 inches of whatever the bottom of the bed is. So if you test 3 feet above, it's not as accurate if you know the approximate bed size and run some calcs that it's at the bottom or close to that bed bottom elevation.
Okay. And just so, I mean, this is a question that came up for a resident. The physical location of the two projects is really, I understand it to be the commuter parking lot and then the Amtrak like maintenance lot up above along where Laments comes in. Okay. And so those are two different spots where they'd be. Okay.
When you're talking about testing, are you talking infiltration testing?
Yes.
So what you're saying is you have to have a depth that they can basically take a core sample and decide at what depth and determine how much water can flow through it, or how quickly it'll flow through, I guess.
And then again, just for education, they do what with that then?
So let's just say the rate they come up with is 3 inches per hour. Then the design engineer would take that rate, and when they run their stormwater calcs, they would use that infiltration rate as part of their design. And it could be a big difference if you're talking a poor infiltration rate versus very fast. It does make a difference. And on the size of that bed, how much water you're infiltrating. So I mean, I know for smaller projects, people will assume a rate, but you really should test at the bottom of the bed and use that rate in your design.
And then the two other projects were the West Avenue and then the connector project. And so both of those are kind of in limbo. And it's the question of how do we, what is the process by which we get the Board of Commissioners to act on our proposal for those two as well?
But, yeah,
What you and Steve talked about.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure, but I think we had discussed previously that perhaps we would go before the Board of Commissioners and discuss in a little more detail what we were thinking. I mean, we could try to get on their agenda for their second June meeting. If, I could ask Steve, if we could be put on there so we could discuss that memo that we had, our recommendation memo.
So you think that's the best way to go about this?
I think it's a start or a piece of it.
So they know, we haven't been before them, because I apologize, I wasn't here at the May meeting, but the memo was sent and they approved it at their May meeting.
They noted it.
They noted it, so they
So
didn't
they-
vote on anything.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I think, though, before we go back, we should have a little more information. Because if they noted it, I'd like to go back with a little bit, a little more criteria as to why we picked that, and with some design idea information in hand.
Well, then this is where I feel like we're a little stuck. Do we then ask Dan to come in for a meeting and discuss this? Because we don't really know what specifics he had about the designs. So this is where I want, thinking we need him back for a little bit.
Well, I know in his, let me see if I have it here. In the results and the costs, I think we have an idea of that, but I think we need to just take a hard look at the topography, the drainage area. I think there's a lot of site features that we should take a look at.
So yeah, I think this is new, as in we've never really kind of gone down this route of saying, we did Banbury Francis Way, they bought into it. I'm not sure who made the presentation, but it just kind of went. And now we're at this point of saying, we need you to pay attention to this because we feel like it's the next thing to do. So how do we make this happen? What's our mechanism? And we're kind of setting a precedent for saying this is how we'll do.
And I agree with you, but I think before we do that, we need to, like, for instance, the results of his study that he gave us, it's great. He gives us costs, he talks about the flooding. So we know we picked these 4 projects based on certain criteria, certain costs. But that was the end of CH2M. I think we need to start taking a look at some of the site features in these areas that they're proposing to see, just ideally, or, you know, is this an area that the topography yields to a basin? And if it doesn't, maybe we need to consider an infiltration structure, or maybe it's in an area that's along the creek, so we could do stream bank restoration. I just think before we go back to the board, we sent the memo, we noted it. I would like to personally just not go from high level to design, but just take a step a little bit lower and look at possibilities of what we could do, because we don't know what possibilities we could have.
So,
We just know that there's flooding at these 4 projects, and we know that,
well, so, I mean, we had said SEPTA, and we know what that looks like from the standpoint of there are 2 locations, and it's retention and whatever. We talked about West Avenue being a green street. We talked about the middle school connector being connections. Got to help me. So is this something that a contractor does? Is this something that we bring back Dan? Is this something we do? This is where I'm a little lost. So what would be the next step?
I think anyone, it could be Dan, or it could be any firm we could work with to say, okay, here's a project, here's the flooding, here's, you know, our criteria. What can we do? Like saying it's a green street, that's great, but what does that entail? Like just take it a step further and just say, could you put out an RF request for proposal for schematic design? I mean, that's really the next step. It's really taking this project, whether it's the township, whether it's township engineer, or we send out a request for that schematic to see really what can we do.
So.
Saying we can do a green street's great,
so
but can we really do it?
Right, so we have to go before the board and say, give us some money, or, you know, contract someone for that next step, right?
I would think
Well,
so.
put out an RFP, right.
Right.
We had discussions a while back as to whether the board was going to make the recommendation of the next step, or we were going to. Have we decided that we're just going to make the recommendations? Our
We did make the recommendation.
Yes, we did. The last meeting, we made the recommendation. And it was noted. That's as far as it went. So,
Well, and I guess the other thing to look at too, like we looked at Banbury Francis Way, we not only looked at it with the criteria, but does it affect downstream? So these 4 projects that we recommended to see on a map where they're related, and make sure, you know, this is a township-wide assessment, so I would like to affect all areas of the township. And say there's a project in this watershed, and a project in this watershed, so.
Well, I
think
mean,
just wanna-
these were the low-hanging fruit, to use an old term, of ones that made sense to go forward because they're relatively inexpensive. They could be done potentially quickly. There's still the big projects that have to be
Sure.
considered. But I'm just saying, if we have these projects, how do we move it forward?
Right.
And does it, I mean, do we do it by talking to our commissioners? Do we do it individually? Do we do it by talking to, you know, asking for time before the board? It's just a new thing that we haven't done before, and I'm trying to, it sounds like we need an RFP for just a basic, simple design.
Yes.
For at least the connector, well, no, the connector, SEPTA, new one, and for West Avenue.
Right, and even before that, well, I mean, we made the recommendation. I'd like to see, and I brought the MS4 map that was submitted last year to see where it lies. I mean, I just think that, but I think the next step is the request for a proposal, but while Steve's working on that, you know, to prepare, I'd like to just see on a map where does this fall in the township? And I think we could take a look at, especially, you know, Paige, Regina, and we could sit with the MS format. We know what watershed it's going to fall in. We have GIS information now, so we have topography, and we have information from Dan that we can obviously see. Like with Banbury Francis Way, it was uphill in the drainage area, where we can take a look at that information and know, okay, it's down here. It's great, it helps flooding in that area, but it doesn't affect anything downstream in our township. But if it's further up and we're between two projects, maybe one's weighted heavily if it's not only benefiting that area, but downstream. So I think, yes, the next step is request for proposal, but I also think we should look and just take a second to look and see what watershed is it and where does it fall? Is it higher in the drainage area? Is it lower in the drainage area? And just make some assumptions maybe to help gear towards that proposal.
Okay, now you've made the assumptions, you've analyzed it, now what's your next step?
Oh, request, absolutely.
We've
I
already
mean-
made the request.
Well, I
No.
mean, you're talking about, so I hear two steps. I hear two parallel steps. One is for maybe Paige to have a discussion with Steve about putting together an RFP for these three projects, feasibility to be done together, and then meanwhile, I don't know, say Regina, Paige, and Heather are lining out the potential pluses of going one route or the other in terms of where they lie in the topography.
I would just like to know going into this, before we go any further, where this lies. I mean, ideally,
So
I don't even know. I mean, that's why I brought this map today. So, I mean, SEPTA,
So SEPTA
SEPTA's-
is right, this whole mess right here.
so it's right on the verge of,
It's all in Gulf Creek,
it's all in
It's in
Gulf
Gulf
Creek.
Creek, yes.
as
okay.
is West Avenue.
So,
Yes.
right, so that's two. So West Avenue and SEPTA, they're both Gulf Creek.
Right, then we've got the middle school.
And the middle school
Is in Ithan.
really,
That's Ithan, right?
That's Ithan.
That's
yeah.
that's Ithan Creek, the middle school.
right.
And the Radnor Trail one that we recommended, that's in Darby.
Did we end up
Yep,
Yeah,
that was
yeah,
one of
that's
the.
on there.
Yep.
That's a
Yeah.
very low-hanging fruit,
Yeah, that's in
I'm sorry,
Darby.
wait, middle school was Ithan, right?
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Well, I mean, then that's good, because now at least we've got, you know,
projects in three of
we've got projects in 3 different watersheds. I just, want to make sure that we're not just doing one area of the township, and Commissioner Booker will be very happy that, because I think he's up in Gulf Creek,
Yeah.
that area. So he'll be ecstatic we're going to do a project in his neighborhood.
All right, so I think I hear, can you talk with Steve about, putting together an RFP for these projects together? For one firm to look at them, that which was our original recommendation.
Right, so for one firm, look at the 4 projects from a feasibility schematic type design
Right.
perspective.
Right, and I assume that's not that much money to,
I think we'll just, I think the clearer the request for proposal is, I think it'll vary on the, I think if you have a very open-end request for proposal, it could get very expensive, but if we put together very,
well, that's why considering that Dan had these in his head, I just wonder about bringing them back to say, give us more specifics, and it might be an hour of his time.
right, and we could, I mean, that's something we could do. Doesn't have to be outside, it could be Dan, it could be anyone.
A couple of them, I think, were pretty clear, like the middle school one, it was adding some inlets, and then I
Right.
suggested maybe you putting a few connector pipes in it. I mean, that's a pretty straightforward one. I think the Radnor Trail one was reasonably straightforward, too. So many feet, a linear type project along the trail of an infiltration trench, and that's a fairly straightforward one as well.
And then SEPTA is,
SEPTA isn't too difficult to figure out. I think the Green Streets one is the one that's more on
Right,
there.
you're right. Well, and the other thing too, even with the Radnor Trail, there could be infiltration structures underneath, but that might be a prime time to do rain gardens. It doesn't have to be a round rain garden, they could be long trenches that, if we're going to introduce a little more green into it, that might be the time, is to put rain gardens at strategic places along the trail.
so that one may have the most, that and West Avenue might have the most MS4 impact?
Yeah, I know that the impact as far as stream restoration and things of that, with that green element in it, are definitely weighted. But you could achieve both. You could have infiltration trenches, but you could also have shallow rain gardens on top of it. So you would do both infiltration, but it would be a nice environmental feature to add.
So if we put this out in an RFP, then we would stress that they consider the MS4 implications to maximize the MS4? I mean, is that how we ask it, or what?
Well, I think,
Charles is looking very quizzical, like, I have no clue.
Yeah, is Steve going to be able to do this? Or is he going to say, no, you've got to get the approval of the board before I can put out an RFP?
I think we'll have to get the approval of the board. I think we should,
Well, I thought we'd be asking Steve to prepare the proposal to present to the board.
yeah, we could ask that.
I mean, how else is it going to get before the board?
Right.
You got to bring something to them.
So we could write a memo to Steve and say, Steve, 2 of the 4 seemed pretty clear, but 2 of them have not only stormwater mitigation measures, but we could essentially add green and more environmental features to it. So we'd like to get a little more information so that we can achieve both. We can achieve flood reduction, but also introduce that environmental aspect. And no matter what they do, it still could count towards that MS4. So I don't want MS4 driving this bus, but just in the back of our minds, just whatever we do, it just is one step closer to achieving our MS4 permit over the next 5 years.
Have a plan here?
Should we vote? Do we need to take a vote on whether we just want to send a memo to Steve to do requests for a proposal for the 2, specifically those 2, the Green Street and the Radnor Trail, to prepare a request for proposal for schematic design?
Okay, help me out. I am confused. We sent a memo to the board last month, said these are the projects we want to do next. They noted. What did that mean?
That means it's on the radar. We're kind of making this up as we go along.
Okay,
And,
so-
well, we're not kind of, we are making it.
We are
as
making
go.
it up.
And I'm just trying to look for a way to make it move forward.
Right, to make it happen.
Right.
So if they noted it, then what's Steve doing about it?
Well, what
I
Heather.
think we should ask for a request for a proposal. And instead of just going before the board and saying, we'd like a request for a proposal, I don't know if we need to do that for Steve just to prepare a request. Obviously, they'd have to approve it, but if I were on the board, I'd like to, instead of one of our committee members going forward and say, we'd like a request for a proposal, as opposed to, we'd like Steve to prepare a request for a proposal. Here's an outline, or here's what we're going to ask for. You give them the okay to send this request for a proposal out. I just think having something in hand, I think is what you're getting at, is so the board can actually see this request for a proposal, and then they can approve either getting more information and schematic design or not.
So Charles, I think it comes down to what's our role and what do we do? I mean, me as a private citizen, I'd like to see the Green Street and I'd like to see the
Right.
SEPTA project move forward because it's going to help my area. So whether I'm on the board or, SWIMAC, or I'm a private citizen, I'm going to push to have this happen. So, what does that mean kind of mechanistically? It's either we talk with our commissioners about having them introduce it, just like Jim introduced the North Wayne Basin repair. So do we go that route where they introduce it, or do we go before them and say, we think it makes the most sense for you to take a look at these all at the same time and, using the same firm, and here's the way we, just kind of line it out a little bit more for them so that we give them a little bit more guidance about what makes the most sense to do engineering-wise.
Well, I guess the only question at that is, are we really going to move forward with 2 projects or 4 projects? I mean, is the board at some point going to say, these 4 projects are great, but we can only afford 2, so then are we jumping ahead a little bit by getting requests for a proposal for something that the board might not want to do? You know
I
what I
look
mean?
at-
Like
I-
the 4
You won't
projects.
know that till you have an
Right.
idea of cost.
I think one of the things we get stuck, well, the township gets stuck at, is they look to the end and they say, oh, we want to do this or we don't do this, rather than saying, let's get to the next step and then make a decision based upon the data that we get out of that next step. So a feasibility study that, or, you know, some kind of proposal that looks at it, at some scheme, and then goes on and says, okay, this one and this one make the most sense.
So,
Here are some folks who might be able to provide some guidance to this discussion.
You can come up
Excellent.
closer, you don't have to sit in the
you
back.
walked in at the perfect time. So the quandary that we have right now is that there was a memo that was put forth that you noted at your May meeting in regards to 4 potential projects from the township-wide assessment. So in order to move forward, do we need to come to you to vote on sending out a request for a proposal to get schematic designs and costs for those 4? Or can we ask Steve to prepare a request for a proposal and then come to you with the request in hand, and you would approve that?
Well, Steve would come to us anyway, even if you ask him, he's going to come to us.
Okay.
I think you should talk to Steve as your official liaison.
Okay. We just want to keep this moving forward, but, you know, we have a lot of ideas and some very high level, but I think we need to take that next step to see, okay, Green Street, but really, what could we do with the Green Street? And have somebody just take a look at things like trees, utilities. There's certain things that could possibly really tweak a project that, before we go back to the board, have an idea, really, this is what's possible to do.
Okay, so we need to talk to Steve, ask him to prepare an RFP for a schematic design or feasibility study for these 4 projects, and then he would bring that to the commissioners.
Well, I'm thinking we might ask him the best way to go about doing it. So rather than just say, this is what we'd like to do, what's the best way to go about doing this? Kind of puts it in his court, so.
And we kind of did that with Banbury Francis Way. It's just that we did that, you know, through Dan. Dan was here, and he kind of vetted the project, and he took a closer look. And that's just, we're just wanting the same thing with these 4 projects. Okay, now we picked 4. We might find that 2 of them are just not feasible. They're not cost effective. They're not going to address the safety or flood mitigation that we hoped it would. And then maybe 2 go away, 1 goes forward, and then maybe 2 others that are lower on the list come up. But you're right, I think the only way to move forward is to take a look at this schematically and get more information and costs. I totally agree.
I don't think we need to vote.
Okay, so I'll talk to Steve about, say we want to move these forward to the feasibility schematic design stage, and can you help us do that and bring that before the commissioners?
And I mean, you could also say, do you think Dan needs to be involved, or do you want to, you know, how do you want to go about it? Again, kind of giving him the flexibility.
Okay, that's fine. I'll talk to him. So, is anyone prepared to talk about more projects beyond that, or are we sort of getting ahead of ourselves?
I think I think we got 4. I think if we go beyond that, we are getting ahead of ourselves. I mean, 4 is quite a bit.
Yeah.
Remember, we were going to have 5 total, and
But-
we got 1 started. Well, that's not even started yet. We're still in discussions. And now we have 4 others that should go a little quicker because these are not nearly the cost, Banbury Way. And it should allow us to move forward with these others. Now, if they get shot down, that's a different story.
Right.
Or if schematically, it's a lot of money to do practically nothing, and we know from what we're looking at that it's probably not going to be that situation. So it's just going to be a cost-benefit discussion and see how we can go forward. But we need some numbers in order to have the board say yay or nay.
But we
But.
need,
But
but we need a project. So, I mean, there's this 4 and some odd million or $3 and some odd million sitting there. The Board of Commissioners saying, we want to spend the money. Even these 4 projects are not going to spend that money. And so we need a project for 2018 that's going to go on Steve's budget and he's looking for a recommendation for us that is at least tied somewhat to the justifications or the, the prioritization that they gave. And so I think we need to look to the next big project, $1 million plus, that's going to be the 2018 project. And maybe it's only going to be, maybe it's only going to be designed in 2018. But I think we need to have the next thing lined up.
Well, what is the cost? Just, and I know it's very rough, but what is the total cost for the 4 right now? I mean, I have it here.
Yeah, please.
Hold on. But they're different, so they're different rankings and different costs.
I couldn't
Hold on,
find
let
all
me
of them,
see.
so that was.
So I see here, so West Avenue Green Street, that's I3. Oh, that's based on square footage, hold on. I3, square footage. Hold on. Various green streets, I3 is up here, hold on, I think it's, there are these. So we're looking at $500,000 for West Avenue, so that's, and then SEPTA, where's SEPTA on our list? I mean, are they all, I think they were all around $500,000, correct?
With the exception of the middle school, which was maybe about half that.
I mean, assuming they're $500,000 each, let's just say that. So you're at 1.5 million. And then, let's just say with the 4th kicked in, so you're at about 2 million for all the projects, roughly. So let's say even 2 of them vetted out that they were good to go, they were, environmentally friendly, stormwater friendly, safety friendly, meeting all our criteria. That's still over $1 million right there, that for the next 2018.
Well, if Joe
Go
were
on.
here,
I mean-
he would say, no, that's 2017. 2018 needs a
2017's
big.
done. 2017's done. I mean, as far as doing a new project, if we got Banbury Francis Way, which I am praying that's going to happen, done in 2017, we have to get that at least started. That's our 2017 project. I think 2 of these 4 will be our 2018 project, and I think the first half of the year we'll be working out schematic. Well, this fall they could work out, summer and fall they could work out schematic design, go back to the board in the fall. They approve 2 projects. We assign a firm then to move forward with the design. Now you're talking January of, 2018 that they're humming.
But
On a
the
good
idea
schedule,
is
on a
that
tight schedule,
Yeah.
like best scenario schedule. I think
I
these are
feel
your-
like we need, I feel like we need to think seriously about a big project beyond these, because we have this big surplus. We need to spend this down. They don't want the money sitting there.
But, so what is the surplus this year?
I gotta pull up my spreadsheet.
I just hate to go so many projects down and then we get tied up in that. And then let's say 3 out of the 4 seem like they're great.
Right, I think we need to focus on getting
Yes.
those 4 done, or at least into construction.
So these are what we're proposing to go in the 2018
As long
budget. Because
as-
this is the thing we're
Right.
aiming for. We're aiming for, in 2 months, or even less, I think, I can't remember what Steve said, we need to tell Steve and Bob what's going in the 2018 budget.
I think in an ideal world, if these 4 projects come back and we look at the schematic design and the costs, and they're good to go, that would eat your entire budget up for 2018 and probably half of 2019, considering that we've got other things in there for televising and cleaning. We've got permitting that we're going to have to still do, MS4 permitting. There's, what did we say, 10 or 20% for operation and maintenance? I mean, realistically, we probably have what, like 750,000 out of the million in a year.
So the
for
way
capital.
it sat was we were going to spend 2.6 million. This included MS4,
This year?
This year.
Because we had a little
Wait,
left
am I
over
in
from last
17
year.
or 18? I think, let's see, this is, yeah, okay.
So, I mean, endgame, Banbury Francis is 1.3.
Yeah, so we had roughly 3 million at the beginning of this year.
So assuming that Banbury Francis Way moves forward,
That's 1.3.
that's $1.3 million, that half of it is spent the end of this year, and then the other half next year, by the time it's designed, well, it is, it's in the process of being designed, but construction costs, you could split that over 2 years.
And we also have Highview and Maplewood.
Right.
Which I have in there
I don't think
somewhere.
surplus is gonna be a problem. I think
Okay.
once Banbury Francis Way goes,
Well, until we
Highview
find out
goes.
what Maplewood is gonna cost, and we have a cost
Right.
of $350,000 there, and $300,000 for Highview, and we don't have any sense of what that number is.
Right.
So it could be we have money, but
I mean, I like having these reserves and projects that we have ready to go, but I feel like we have Banbury Francis Way, it's not going all the way yet. And then we have these 4 projects, and it's not going all the way yet. And then I feel like we're digging this hole, but we're not moving forward on anything. I just don't want to dig too deep. Now, granted, if we see that some of these 4 projects we recommended aren't going to work out for whatever reason, yeah, I think we absolutely then need to start looking at other projects.
we don't, let's see. We need we need something for 2018. If those things fall by the wayside, then we have a,
But I-
we
but I'm hoping
can't
we
add
know
again
that.
until August of 2018. So we have this funny, like, once a year
But
way
again,
of
do we have to
proceeding.
be specific about a project, or can't we just say capital improvement projects and allocate a certain amount of money towards it? And then, in parentheses underneath, list the potential projects. Like, for instance, we can even include Highland, Mapleview, SEPTA, Green Street, because we don't know yet.
So, I think I'm hearing you should, talk to Steve and just say, this is what we're thinking now. What is it that you would like to see?
We want, yeah, right.
Right. Well, what I'm hearing now is we only want to move it so forward.
We want to move it forward.
But we don't want to get to the next big project. We want to say, we want to work through these
No,
to see what happens. That's what I'm hearing.
no, I want to keep moving on Banbury Francis Way, and I
Well, no,
want
no, no,
to.
yeah, but I'm saying, so that's farther down the pipeline than anything else, okay? And so it's potentially could happen if we get through, these stumbling blocks there. And then we have these 4 projects. So what I'm hearing you saying is, don't move to the next project until we get through
Get
these
these
4.
going, that's right, you got to push
Right.
them uphill. Once they start coming down on their own, because we've approved it, and we're headed towards, we've actually got a
Right.
design, and we're headed towards approval designs, and headed towards construction, then we'll be looking at the next one. But also, we'll be another year down the road.
Right.
I'm
Okay.
afraid Banbury's going to end up in 2018 also.
Yeah.
It may.
You
It
know,
might.
it just-
And you know what?
Thank you,
It might
guys.
go away. They might have so much opposition from the neighbors
Well,
that you just.
okay, I have a question on that. A lot of this was caused by, the impact to the neighbors and everybody else was much less when we were looking at a 10-year storm. Since we decided to go 25, we've caused a lot of hassle, a lot of,
Well, we
extra-
recommended that early
I
on, but we
know.
also went back and said to the board, here's what it would be for the lesser storms. And the board's like, nope, that's it. We're holding it.
but,
That-
but if we get, so what do? Do nothing? Or do we go for a 10-year storm?
Or split the difference. We said 25, 10 is a lot less. Do like a 15-year
Do
storm.
a 15,
something in
whatever.
between. I mean, I know
But
they
our
were
energy
adamant.
should be spent on that project primarily, and then getting the next 4 going, because we think in dealing with these, and the reason we came up with these 4
Right.
is these were the low-hanging fruit. These were the guys that were, hey, on the trail, to dig a trench and make basically a rain garden along the whole side of the thing.
Right.
Wow, and the impact was significant.
Right.
And the others, all of them were low-hanging fruits, things that we could get up and doing. Once we've got jobs that are moving forward, the board's going to have confidence in us, especially if they work.
Right.
But the board's going to have confidence in us, and we'll be able to say, we want to do this one next.
Right.
We want to do this one next. And it won't take 6 months just to get to a design stage. Look at how long we've been dealing with Banbury.
Well-
And why we're at this stage now, I don't understand.
Well, and I think we need to just keep on top of, with township staff and just make sure that meeting happens again sooner than later, and that I think the residents' input is very important. But then that's up to the board to decide, can we do a hybrid? Can we do a 15-year storm and the impacts are less and we're saving the trees? You know, another point.
Well, wait a second, but you recognize that the board's not going to understand what this means.
Oh, so let me just,
You know, because they're not going to see a design for 10 years, and they're not really going to understand what the 10-year is. I mean, everybody says, well, 25 years is better.
right.
It's
So
not necessarily.
what happened, and I think we need to take a little bit of the blame, because we didn't yell loud enough early in the process to talk about why is it that you fixated on 25? We fixated on 25 as I was in the meeting because it's a big number. And that seemed to be the reason.
Better than 10.
Right. And now it's become like a rule.
No,
That 25 is where we're going, and be damned if we can't do 25. I mean,
No,
that's.
I don't think that's the rule. I think for that particular project, for the impact that it was going to cause and the cost that it was going to cause, that we felt it was best for a 25-year storm. Because I think dropping to a 15-year storm, it's a savings, but is it that much a savings compared to a 25-year storm and the reduction of flooding that you would gain? Because I remember we went round and round. Dan had, presentation on that. He's like, here's the 10, here's the 20, here's the 25. And back last year, we thought it was overall the best to move forward with the 25. I'm not opposed to a 15 or 20, and that might be the way it has to go if it saves trees. And I
Heather,
know,
we didn't think it was best to move forward with 25.
Well, that's why I
We
think I
got
had to listen to
told.
that
We figured it was best to move forward with 10. That's what we agreed upon. That's what we presented to the board. And we were told we were going to do 25.
I thought when Dan presented, he gave them numbers for the 10, 15, 25. I'll have to pull out our memo, but I thought
I was pretty sure we recommended 10.
I feel like we recommended more.
I have to go back and look, but I also think that we need to know, we keep hearing, oh, all the trees are coming down. We need to know
We need to know-
what the
right.
actual impact is.
Right.
Because it may not be.
It may not be as bad as
what
they're
we-
thinking,
What you
right.
think.
Right.
We might be able to something might be able to be tweaked a little bit and, it save more trees.
Right.
Again, kind of looking forward, I think bringing in the residents earlier in the process here, my idea was to present here, and Jim said, no, it's better for a private meeting. But I think they don't understand all the work that went into this. And, it's been 2 years, I guess, of
Almost,
thinking.
yeah.
And it isn't like it's a slapdash, well, let's go do this thing. It's
Right.
2 years of work. And I think the residents have to understand that part of it. And you're right, there have to be the specifics.
Right.
Of this is exactly what tree would go, this one
Right.
doesn't, or we can,
Because there might not be any trees that go. They might be able to.
well, there are, apparently there are,
There are?
yeah.
That's what I've heard, but Heather, you've worked on plenty of projects too, and, things get started and they haven't been quantified, and, the tail grows sometimes, that it's going to have an impact that maybe it doesn't.
And I think what's going to happen, I could be totally wrong. I have a feeling it's going to drop to a 20, from a 25 to like a 15 or 20-year storm in order to work with the residents, work with the community, work with the township, and still reduce flooding in there. I could be wrong.
Well, we
but-
have to reduce the flooding in there.
Right. There's no doubt.
So, there's no doubt. And so we can't say it's 25 or nothing.
No, I totally agree.
So-
I
and-
think we're.
But the problem is you've got to take your design pretty far along to show what happens at 25, at 20 and at 15, at 10. And that's all design costs.
And I thought that we saw one of the presentations early on, that they showed how much smaller the bed was going to be, T&M.
Well,
with
remember
like
the
a
first
15 year
presentations
storm.
We do, we have that someplace.
I know we
Yeah,
have that somewhere.
Remember the
Yeah.
first, I think it was 10-year that we started off with.
Okay.
Where we had the design, and the beds are much smaller. The
Sure.
distance up Windsor was much smaller.
Sure.
The amount of land that was taken for the basins was much smaller. So, you know.
So I have a memo that we sent to the town, to the Board of Commissioners on
Paul's got it
December
all.
16th, 2015.
2015.
It was December 21st meeting for the Board of
almost 2
Commissioners. Yeah, it is. It says, so we asked for authorization to submit proposals for design in the right-of-way at this location to mitigate flooding and downstream stormwater impacts. We did additional modeling. That's probably the discussion I had with Dan, so I have to look at the meeting minutes around there. And then it says it will address significant flood hazard or reducing flooding within, so it's down the firehouse. Okay, it says the estimated cost for design is 900 to 1 million. Construction date starting in 2016. Nothing about the design storm in the memo. So maybe it's in our meeting minutes, but it's not
I wonder
in
if it
our
was something
proposal.
that Dan and I presented. I feel like, Paul, you or I or Paige, we were at a meeting.
You guys were at a meeting.
We were at a
I remember
board
being at a meeting.
I remember being at a meeting where Dan presented different design storms, and Don Curley was really adamant about the 25-year storm. It's got to be the 25-year storm.
I recall that part of it, but I don't know what the exact genesis of the 10 versus 25 was,
Right.
so.
So I will take on digging into the archives here to find,
Your ultimate goal here, what is it?
my
that you're-
ultimate goal, yeah, I
is to
guess.
just
it's-
find out? Is that where we are?
I think that's it at
not
this
moving
point.
anything forward, that's looking
Right.
back. Yeah, seriously, it's fun to talk about and fun to
Well,
try
I mean,
and
I-
decide how we got here, but really, that's not helping to move things forward.
Right, but
I think what it
truly
is establishing, I think we need to figure out why 25-year became the de facto.
Oh, it was at the Board of Commissioners meeting, and Don Curley was really strong about 25 years, and nobody put forth a salient argument to say, no, it's got to be 10, and this is why.
I
That-
think,
no, you know, that's really what it happened. It came out of the Board of Commissioners that we're doing 25 years, even though it rather largely increased the space and the distances and everything else that were involved in the project.
but I think at that point, too, the schematics we had for the 25 did not extend as far.
You're right,
And
you're right.
the,
'Cause they-
well,
yeah.
there may have been assumed easements, and I think there also were some utilities that hadn't anticipated, I think. So I think it seemed like not that big a difference between the 10 and the 25.
Well, interesting with the utilities, because one of the things that the boards discussed was that they were aging water and sanitary,
Right,
so
need to replace them.
they
The
could,
other two, they were always going to be replaced.
that were going to be replaced.
That was down Banbury.
So, I mean, that's just an opportunity to do not only stormwater, but to replace aging infrastructure at the same time, which I know it's a nuisance if you live on that street, but what you're getting for that is newer
It's-
utilities. and
It's a nuisance until something breaks.
Right, right, and then it's a real nuisance. Well, let's do this,
Nobody is going to like the construction.
Right.
You know, when you dig up the street, you're going to inconvenience all of these residents because their parking is going to go away, their access to their home is going to go away for a while, and so on. It's going to be a mess. But, you know, temporary inconvenience, permanent improvement. It's not only for them, it's also for the rest of the township. Don't forget the impacts are immediate there, but also we impact further down the streams.
So-
I think in the end result, everyone will be happier. I mean, I did a project recently, it was a private campus, but I mean, yeah, it tore up every single drive aisle in this large campus, and everyone was inconvenienced, but now it's great, you know, and it's functioning the way it should.
So I think in order to just keep tabs on Banbury to move it forward, I think we need to, you know, schedule this meeting, push for this meeting with the residents, truly find out what, if any, trees are going to be eliminated in order to do this project. And then, once we have that information, to truly understand what their concerns and what trees will be removed, then I think we need to go back to the board and say either we started this in December of 2015.
Actually, I have a note.
It's
from November 9th.
2017 it's 2 years. Like, we either need to change the criteria and drop the storm and see what the costs and the impacts would be on the design. Or we might as well, I mean, this is crazy. I'd rather walk away and pick a new project, and I think that Banbury is definitely worth it. I mean, I would hate to walk away from that. But if we're gonna wait another 5 years to do a stormwater project, is it worth it? I
If
mean,
we can't get past this,
it's ridiculous.
it's going to happen with every project that
Right.
goes up there.
Yep.
And we're going to be basically,
This
it's
is-
totally ineffective. Totally.
This is a great project for flooding there,
The
flooding
problem
downstream.
is, the problem is, when you bring your residents in, they're not going to know what other options are available.
Right.
And you're going to have your consultant take a look ahead of time at a 15 and a 10, and to understand how things change as we reduce the storm year storm. So otherwise, it's going to be useless. 'Cause
How
the
they
residents-
change with regards to flooding or
No,
design?
With the
Well,
size of the beds.
Let's talk about everything. Because if you're a resident and someone's up there saying, well, I really don't have to do this because I can do that, my first question is, okay, what's it mean in the overall project? You know, and if we have to go back to the board to have the consultants review this and pay them extra money to do this kind of work, we will never get this job done. You know, this is a matter that in my opinion, the staff should be pushing this along and doing this job right now. That's my opinion.
Well, let's just keep in touch with Steve. Let's see how soon we can schedule a meeting. Let's see what really will come out of it. But I'm pretty sure T&M, they presented at some point, like a 15-year or 10-year,
There-
10-year storm.
There was a 10-year, there was a chart with a bunch of different options, and we saw that, and there were like 7 different layouts or something like that, and the year storm and design year and the cost and the extent of the disturbance and all. And just so, yeah, I think we need to review those then, and, you know, what's the impact? I mean, so maybe
the
there's
consultants-
less disturbance, but, you know, for instance, like the aging sewer, you know,
Well-
that doesn't get replaced.
Well,
You
it
know,
could,
you know,
look,
it
and
could
don't
even be
forget
that.
that could be replaced, and just because they're digging up the street anyway.
Separately.
Right.
Right, and it'll be paid for separately out of a different budget. But the point is that this consultant has got to become armed with solutions, recognizing the type of issues that we've got. Now, they sat through this meeting, they know what the residents want and what their concerns are. They've got to become armed with solutions.
Well, then, let's talk to Steve about this next meeting with the residents. Let's show them. Right, let's show them what another option is. Now, that's not to say the board's going to approve it, but that's when the board will have to make a decision in order to move this project forward to reduce flooding for safety of the neighborhood. I know the residents aren't thrilled of construction, nobody is, but we feel that this is, and we can go to the board, we'll send a memo, attend a meeting, say we, feel you need to reconsider this, or we're going to be here 2 years from now, still talking about this.
Okay. Hey, you have a lot.
But I think I said it last meeting, I think that a lot of the other projects aren't going to have quite the issues that this one, the Banbury Francis has, because a lot of them are just reducing flooding, but not necessarily meeting a certain year storm. So we don't have a target of eliminating flooding for a certain storm, it's just reducing the impacts.
Some other problem will come up, I'm sure.
Well, this
There'll be
is what- I mean,
something.
This is no different than any
Right.
research project. There's always something that gets in the way, and you have to figure way around it. What's striking about this to me is that we've become the de facto project engineers for these things, and it's just kind of amusing, sad, that somehow
And
we're pushing.
And we only push for an hour or 2 hours once a month. This should never happen.
Well, now that the board has approved us working more closely with the township, we are going to work more closely with the township and just keep pushing.
let's see. That's pretty much it. Yeah, so, I guess Regina hasn't shown up yet.
So we'll just wait on.
We can just wait on the minutes.
Improve it next month.
Yeah.
The meeting minutes that I was not at.
I'm not.
I'm always around.
I'm just,
I don't go anyplace.
I should be here. I'm going to be out of town early in the day, but I should be back.
Confirm with Joe. That one of them is here.
Well, and that's important to meeting too, because MS4 should be the highlight.
So
Of
are
the
we going to
evening.
get them here, Meliori, to?
I am going to press for that.
And tell me
Yes.
exactly what we want. You explained this in the note you sent to me, but tell me exactly what we want them to come with. This drawing with the,
Right, so ideally, what I would like to see from them is a map that delineates the different watersheds in the township, that shows the outfalls, like the current MS4 map does, that they've calculated the 10% sediment reduction area for the township,
based on township land.
based on township land and land cover, correct? They'll have this area, and there's calculations and coefficients that enter into it based on the land cover and so on, that they'll have this area, and then they'll have on the map delineated possible projects or project locations to do stormwater
Okay.
projects. And I think we should start with township-owned land as opposed to private. Not saying we don't engage that in the future, but right now, let's go with what we own. And here's an opportunity, here's an opportunity, here's an opportunity, and that we know maybe there's 20 potential projects. And we can say, okay, and with I mean, I don't know if they'll have approximate costs, but give us an idea, high level of, okay, this could cost $200,000, but.
We have costs on, for all the projects that we have there. We have rough, high-level cost guesstimates, if you will.
And it
So-
might be that a lot of these are on our list.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm hoping that most of them ideally are on
I would think so.
our
I think-
list. I mean, it was a pretty extensive
list.
township-wide assessment. I would think that, we could at that point say, okay, let's go forward, and we might pick 10 of them and say to the board, these are the 10 that I think we should move forward with in order to meet that 10% reduction.
And
So
Heather,
do we need, does somebody need,
Heather,
you
it-
talk with them, Meliori, before the July meeting to talk
Yes.
about the projects that we?
Yes, I would
Okay.
like to, I talked to
And we
Steve
should-
about a subcommittee that we would meet with them before this meeting.
and if you put those things in on your MS4 for this year, and we don't get it done, as long as we address it next year,
Well,
Is
we
that-
have to put
you don't
forth.
have to, in other words, you don't have to get those things done this year.
No.
You just have to, you have to have a plan to try and move forward. All the state wants you to do is have a plan.
Right, there are PRP plans, pollutant reduction plans, and they want us to submit a plan that's going to show over the next 5 years that we're going to put forth these projects in order to meet that reduction.
But if you don't do, over those next 5 years, if some of those projects you don't get done, but you do others, that's okay too.
Right, now, if halfway through, if we decide that, oh, well, I feel that this stream restoration, for whatever reason, is the better way to go versus a rain garden over here, we do have to submit to DEP and let them know that, we're switching gears for X, Y, and Z on this project versus that there'll be annual reports, that we'll have an opportunity to keep them updated. But I kind of get the sense in talking with DEP and the coordination that, at least in my experience, our firm has had, I don't think that they're out to get anyone. I think that if we show and the municipalities show that we're really striving towards, this PRP plan, I mean, a lot of it is funding. We're in a good position. We have a stormwater fee, and we are promoting capital projects regardless of the MS4 permit. So I think we're in a really good position to meet that permit, but I think DEP is looking for the effort. And that if that 365-day of the 5th year comes and that 5th project's not done, I don't think they're taking you to court. But I do think that they're going to want to see continued progress, and that if projects do change and funding changes, that when you submit your annual report, they're going to want to know about it,
Yeah,
which makes sense.
yeah, I think that there's a lot of counties, a lot of townships in the state of Pennsylvania, and all they want to know is that people have a plan and they're all working forward. They're all looking forward to reducing their stormwater problems.
Now, if after you're in your 5th year and nothing's been started,
Well,
Then-
but you've been updating all along and saying,
Well,
we're
but-
trying to do this, we're trying to do that.
but that's not what the permit says. The permit says that you're going to have 5 projects constructed within 5 years. Now, how they hold you to that, starting construction, ending construction, it'll be very interesting to see.
Yes, it will.
It will.
How long has this permit, this requirement been in existence?
The last year.
Right? And how many townships?
Oh, I mean, the MS4 permit's been around for a while. The latest regulation,
This is much more burdensome.
correct, has been like the last year or so.
Right. So, and to date, did I hear that Radnor Township's at the bottom of compliance for MS4?
I don't do that, but I would not.
I would say we're middle of the pack,
Okay, middle
from
of the
what
pack,
I
all right.
understand. I don't think we're getting an A. I don't think we're getting an F.
Okay.
We might
I
be a
think
C.
I think there are many small municipalities that just don't have the money to put forward for these things.
And I would think that those would be the municipalities that DEP would be very concerned about in trying to get things going. And that's where they're going to put their resources. If they see that this township is at least trying and has a plan and is moving forward, I think you'll have a minimal problem. That's where I was going with that.
Right, I agree.
All right, any other comment? Or should we just, say our next meeting will be July 13th? And then meeting adjourned? Okay.